Welcome to the first semi-final match of the Trash Bowl. This time around we've got Pimpkarp versus Crowncooker as they're heading into their first game, and we once again have the situation that people have referred to as JJ Entertainment, which is me trying to entertain you. Very straightforward. Both players banned their opponent's warrior, that being a control warrior. Kind of a popular ban choice, especially since we're not seeing any combo priest around here. Actually, no, never mind, Crowncooker does have a combo priest. But of course, we've seen the combo priest not being as successful as we thought it would be. And Crowncooker starting up with the Quest Shaman. Pimpkarp starting off with his Highlander Hunter. Quest Shaman plays the Quest on one, who would have thought? Links on one I think is a good choice. It's not the most popular choice because sometimes you want to get the effect of the rush, but you really want that extra point of damage every turn. And especially against the Quest Shaman, it's a good choice. And Red Trap, also by the way, usually doesn't pay off paying it on 2. But Quest Shaman has so many small minions that it just might be worth it. And if not, at least you have your Sunriver Spy combo, you can play another Lynx if you want to. Maybe Animal Companion and Sunriver Spy the next turn, because as much as the Quest Shaman does have all of the small things, they're probably not going to proc it on turn 3. We're seeing the very predictable trade here, and I wouldn't be surprised if we maybe just saw some draw or some Lucky Generation. Yeah, Lucky Generation makes a little more sense. Now you can also get yourself the spell right away. I don't see why you wouldn't do that, except for keeping it for the Wasp, which is fair enough. But if you coin out the Engineer, you want to Rat Trap, so coins the Engineer. That's huge for Pimpkarp right now. That should be the third card exactly, and that Doom Rat might single-handedly win him this game, because 6 points of health can be the difference here, and we don't see a Life Drinker on Crowncooker's hand, so Pimpkarp just playing some stats down, and I assume hitting the face, yeah. Takes one trade, fair enough, but does hit the face with the 6 points of damage, and now the Life Drinker happens. But you don't have the resources to deal with the Doom Rat this turn, and if one thing deals 12 points of damage to you, that's a lot, especially if you're a control deck. If you're an aggro deck, you can sometimes afford it, because then you're just gonna try to killing them. I mean, Rain of Toads is useful, but not soon enough. The Wasp would be without the hero power, so it only triggers once. And the Bog Shaper is too expensive, even after taking out the Wasp, which is one of the other reasons why, of course, you like the trade, because otherwise he would have still been one off playing the Bog Shaper, but you know, you don't want to give him the biggest possible board. Ziliax would be a decent thing to deal with a Wasp, not that you really have to. Hero Power would have also done something, but again, the Doom Rat, that is 2 hits away from just single-handedly winning you the game. So, that was, if you're Crowncooker, you might want to look at that later and see if even the risk of Rat Trap is worth coining that Novice Engineer. Again, I can understand when you play the Ethereal and you want to use your mana, but this isn't looking too hot. I mean, yes, the Life Drinker is there. The Bog Shaper could deal with a Ziliax. It's probably a lot cleaner than Life Shapering here. And then yeah, you get to have the one damage in the face if you want to potentially trigger a secret. Doesn't, and Leroy's lethal. That's very simple lethal. And wow, that Rat Trap, 18 damage over the entire game. That is, you know, more than half of your health. And I think that single-handedly made the difference in this matchup. Now, of course, Crowncooker done with the Pimpkarp done with the Highlander Hunter. Temper Rogue and Murloc Paladin coming up, and if you're Crowncooker, the question is, do you go back to Quest Shaman? Do you play Combo Priest? Do you play Highlander Rogue? all of them have to win. And goes back to the Quest Shaman. Probably the most reliable of those decks, I wanna say. Again, the red trap was a little unfortunate. You could have played around that better, but here's what you don't want to see on your starting hand. Tip the scales. I could see the argument for keeping Grimscale, but yeah, there's better 1-drops. And we see the Tidehunter, which is pretty much exactly what you want on 1. And Pimpkarp getting another good start here. This time Crowncooker draws the left wing right away, but plays Murmy on 1. I can see the argument for waiting for the Tidecaller until he gets some like tip or any kind of mass summoning, but I think you just go for it. 2 damage, yes it can come from a lack, yes it can come relatively early, but it also could come later, so... I mean, he didn't have the 2 Murloc follow-up play, and wow, War Leader. Meanwhile, Crowncooker only gets the Tidehunter, decent for trading, but no Murloc synergy there. With a Sledgehammer in hand, it would have been fun if he had some Murloc synergy, of course. Not a huge difference. Goblin Lackey could be used to kill something off here. You could also just play the Tidehunter or the Totem. I personally like playing the Tidehunter here because you're forcing some good trades one way or another. Even if your opponent does take the beneficial trade for them, he doesn't get to kill off everything. And you still get to clear off the board, slow your opponent down, which is what you want to do as the Shaman. Nightmare Amalgam drawn, that might be the play, because War Leader, the board isn't that wide. Okay, I can understand wanting to play the War Leader here, but I don't see why the player that played the War Leader here would not have also played the Tidecaller on 1. Because both of those are relatively aggressive plays. I guess the assumption is that you can't really play 2 War Leaders in 1 turn, so you might as well use the reserve War Leader, but I don't know. It seems a little inconsistent from a playstyle standpoint. We do get the full board clear here and an Evil Totem. And we just might see the True Silver coming down to just take care of the Totem right away, because that is a big threat. Second True Silver drawn doesn't change anything from the perspective of the plays you can make. Tidehunter still in the hand, but not really, no small Murlocs to go with it, so it was either Tasty Fin or True Silver, and I think you don't want that Totem to go live, so, or any more than it has already, so you might just hit it. Wow, decides to, if I saw correctly, yeah, he hits the face. Yes, that is the place, and yes, you're trying to win fast against Quest deck. I say it almost every time. Quest decks you want to win fast against. So I can see why you're doing it, but your opponent wants the value, and it looks like they're gonna get the value from the Totem. So we'll see how that pans out. Zephyrs would be huge if the deck was already, well, half empty, as in exactly one of each copy. And no really very smooth plays here because of how the mana pans out. You might just end up playing the Tasty Fin and maybe the Tidecaller first. Same idea for the Amalgam is possible. Hero power comes down, of course, but keeps going for the face though. I mean, at least you're consistent. Again, except for the Tidecaller in the first turn, but I'm not gonna dwell on that too much. Siamat not quite in reach this turn, but next turn it would be, and that could turn the board around if it needed to. So even if we're seeing a tip turn soon, we might still not see much come from it. I mean, the Sandstorm Elemental and the Siamat both have good ways of dealing with the majority of the board there. Siamat taking out 2 minions, potentially, or 1 and producing a big taunt. And the Sandstorm Elemental taking out everything with 2 or less health, which most Murlocs do have. And yeah, I mean, play some Murlocs, I guess. Or play another True Silver. But that doesn't get you anywhere, really. I think the Murloc deck should actually play its Murlocs. That seems like something you would want to do as the Murloc deck. And I think that this matchup is slowly turning in favor of Crowncooker, or right now not so slowly. Being able to take some trades and then just pushing it in there. Siamot comes down, looks like, which is understandable, and this is probably just a taunt Divine Shield. Sack a 1/1 into the sack your faces, one of the faces that is, into the Sylvan Recruit, and yeah, just hit rest the face and tell your opponent deal with this. And this, of course, is where Toxin could come in, but the Divine Shield makes it still not perfect, the play that is. And yeah, that was so tied up at 1 apiece. Pimpkarp finally lost the game to the Quest Shaman, so Crowncooker can get that out of there, and both down to 2 decks to choose from. And of course that means that also for both players the matchup becomes more predictable now. We've got Pimpkarp playing the Tempo Rogue or Murloc Paladin, the Tempo Rogue or Highlander Hunter again, and Crowncooker playing, the Tempo Rogue or the Murloc Paladin, and Crowncooker plays the Combo Priest or Highlander Rogue. We see Combo Rogue on Murloc Paladin. So far, both players going back to the decks that they lost with. I mean, worked for your opponent, right? Tidehunter seems like a possible keep, but I guess you are planning to go for the Crystology combo, so it does make sense to not play this like you would a Shaman. And you just might play Toxfin turn 1, he doesn't. Fair enough. As opposed to other matchups, it makes more sense against the Combo Priest to sometimes keep back your small 1-drops, because it allows the Combo Priest to have some good trades for healing synergy later with either Northfair Cleric or Light Warden. I don't think we're gonna see nothing too crazy right now. We might just see the heal on the 12-year, maybe Light Warden Circle. That seems a little unnecessary. We might also just see Nefsat Ritualist. He does go for the Pyro Circle. I mean, it makes sense, clears the board, it protects your Pyro with the taunt. You can probably heal it and still produce some damage from that. Leroy is not what you want to see right now. Yeah, double Toxfin. You have to have a 2 health minion with Poisonous, trying to get through that taunt. Almost seems like it might be the best strategy, but it's still not nice.
Let me think.
Murloc Paladin so far not having a lot of luck. Goes with the Recruit. I think we're just gonna see a Light Warden Nefrosat Ritualist here, maybe Northshire Cleric and Nefrosat Ritualist. Either way, 2 procs from the Ritualist for the minion that's played. In this case, it's 2 cards drawn. This is definitely the more conservative option here. The more aggressive one would have been to get the 5/2 Light Warden this turn. And you think that True Server is actually a decent pickup, but it still doesn't quite get through that taunt. You have to produce board first. I still think Double Toxin makes sense to some degree. It's not very smooth, but you don't want your 1 health minion to be the one with Poisonous, because you know the Pyro's on board, and 1 spell is very believable. This also works. You're just producing some semi-high health taunts and saying, I'm applying the Poisonous next turn, especially given that you are facing a sizable board. That makes sense. We're seeing a Met on the hand. I don't see why you wouldn't play that this turn. Trades are possible, but not even absolutely necessary, although you do know that your opponent has Toxin. They've just played one, so they might very likely have another. And yeah, I think we're gonna see some trades here, making sure that the taunt lives, then you can produce the Amet, and then you can just do whatever you want with Amet. Decides to go double Light Warden. Interesting. Double Light Warden healing proc on 12-year. Produces more direct attack than the Amet, but also leaves the Light Wardens in theory more vulnerable. But in practice, it's a very minion-based deck. You're not going to run into Consec here, so it does make sense to play it accordingly. True Silver seems to maybe come down here, which actually is hurting you more than it heals you, because the Light Wardens proc off of the healing proc off of the True Silver. So you might just want to play more Murlocs, but this is just a really bad situation for Pimpkarp. We've seen he doesn't deal well with taunts. Of course, Siamat a little bit of a different size category than the injured Tolvir, but either way it seems like taunts are problematic. Taunts are not problematic if you have Leroy Jenkins, but I don't think that's gonna help you a lot long term. Holy Ripple only has one healing proc, as does Hero Power. I think Hero Power is the more sensible play here. Hero Power would make it so that he can attack for, let's see, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15. That seems pretty decent. Beaming Sidekick doesn't directly help, but, you know. And now, of course, would be a good turn to pick up the True Silver, take over the Light Wardens, but you're still losing. I don't see an out here for Pimpkarp, and it looks like this Paladin might go down being 0-2 so far. Yeah, that also happens. Yep. Now you just heal your opponent's face and you hit with the Light Warden. That's seems like the play. The Whelps, also another different way of tragic irony. And Pimpkarp down 1-2. I say it every time, I'm gonna say it again. Pimpkarp knows that Crowncooker is now bringing the Highlander Rogue. Now you're bringing between your Tempo Rogue and your Murloc Paladin what you think you're more comfortable with facing the Highlander Rogue. Which deck is that? Depends. Seems like he's very comfortable with the Murloc Paladin. Also seems like it hasn't done him very much lately. I personally, if I was in his situation, I would be frustrated with the Murloc Paladin after 2 consecutive losses and would probably switch off. I think that's what I did in my match actually when I had 2 consecutive losses. So he didn't draw what he needed either time. So on the one hand you can now be frustrated and say, okay, why does this not work? I want to do something else, just get a bit of a different rhythm in. Or you want to say, it has to happen at some point and just cue it again. Does decide to go to the Rogue, and we see Maiev on Captain Valera. 1000 Rogue wins. This might legitimately be the first time that we've had a 1000 win hero portrait on video. Keeps the Waggle Pick and nothing else. For Pimpkarp, Crowncooker seems to be stuck with 8 drops and a Miscreant. Now, Crowncooker's deck is a lot slower than Tempo Rogue inherently. That doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna lose, but that means that you're trying not to lose in the early game. And it would help if you had cards that you could play. I'm not gonna deny that. Coining out a Miscreant, classic play. And let's see what we get in terms of lackeys. Faceless is really good to establish a board. Goblin's more of a control one to take some good trades, but it can still be helpful to protect your more important stuff, or even just to have that one extra point of damage somewhere. Crowncooker staring down the own Miscreant, but not really any use for it. Decides to play it anyways just to have some stats on the board. Has to pass. And now we could see a Candle Taker, we could see a Hero Power Southsea, we could see some lackeys. There's really a lot of possibilities right now on what could go down here. Backstab doesn't really do too much. I wouldn't personally recommend it. Plays the Backstab. Fair enough. Yeah, runs the Southsea in there, it seems. No, he does. Oh, he runs everything else in there. Yeah, I mean, establishing a board makes sense, but you could have probably done that better by just taking the Faceless Lackey and just accepted a trade or hit in there later. Maybe, yeah, I don't even know, I don't want to waste Evis on that. Deadly Poison is nice, but you're probably not going to use it right now. Faceless Candlekeeper seems like a reasonable play. And Pimpkarp definitely still having the very important tempo in this matchup. And 21 health. You do now have the potential Ziliax turn. Ziliax does die somewhat easily. Oh, right. Forgot for a split second there that the crawler is in fact a mech. That's huge. And this is the kind of thing that you would want to eviscerate just so your opponent doesn't get another healing proc, but you don't have the backstab anymore. SI7 agent. 1 mana short of being able to combo out both him and Evis. You probably just have to accept that your opponent heals to full at this point. Or, yeah, pretty much full. Yeah, the Waggle Pick, Deadly Poison, the easiest way to deal with it. Doesn't quite heal to full, but still, 28 is a long shot from the 23 that you were at before this Ziliax. And we're already seeing the Highland Rogue do its thing, which is playing it slow and methodical and controlling the situation. We're seeing Hero Power and potentially the Sapper. We see the Sapper. And I think now, as Pimpkarp, you might just have to push everything into face, including the weapon last, maybe replay whatever you got, then get yourself, okay, it seems like he's playing the Lucky first, maybe he wants to get it back, maybe he wants to play the SI7, yep, it appears to be the SI7 so that he can hopefully bounce that, although honestly Cruel Taskmaster is a pretty good bounce as well, and Miscreant of course is to it. Going up to 11 is also not necessarily where you want to be. We're seeing the Pharaoh Cat come back, instantly replayed, and Grand Mummy comes down as well. That's a pretty threatening board, and Siamat can deal with a lot of that though. But the question is it going to be enough? For this turn, yes. I think we're going to see Wind Fury Rush. We might see a Taunt variety. Rush Taunt makes a little bit of sense as well, but you want to be in control of what you take out, so just kind of take those two out. I think the 4/4 is going to take out a 2/2 and or that, and now you're looking at 2 points of damage all of a sudden instead of, well, 1 point of damage and 1 on your turn instead of whatever that was before. Waggle Pick plus Eviscerate is 8. Waggle Pick double Eviscerate is impossible, and then Cleave double Eviscerate is still 1 short. 1 mana here. 1 mana is all you need. Waggle Pick double Eviscerate would be perfect lethal. But nope, not this turn. Seeing the Advent come down, we're seeing the trade with the Grand Mummy and 4 damage to the face. Full well knowing that there is a very likely lethal next turn. And it looks like that will in fact be the case. Hook Tusk. Right, Hook Tusk can produce taunts. That doesn't really help with the eviscerates though. And now it comes down to, do you get a card that costs 4 less that you can proc it with? And you do. Zephyrus, some people might say it's a strange choice. Hey, it did its job. Well, not actually, but you know, you have Myra's, it makes sense to run it. And that is indeed incredible. So my whole speech about the to win thing, now even more so. You don't get a choice anymore, but at least now you know the matchup is gonna be Murloc Paladin, Highlander Rogue. And there is really nothing that can change about that, so I assume that we're gonna see a quick queue in the game here. Because, again, no meaningful choice here. We're seeing Captain Valera versus Uther. And it's gonna come down to this. Once again, tip on starting hand, not what you want to see. Decides to keep the 1-drop this time around, instead of hard mulliganing for the combo. And it seems like that paid off somewhat, because you do have the potential follow-up Toxfin, although you don't have a 2-drop yet, which would be better on 2 than a Toxfin. Highland Rogue once again not having the fastest start, and we're seeing Prismatic Lens, and this matchup just might come down to this. I'm not saying it definitively will, because even with the Lens, the Rogue still has some avenues for winning, but the Lens is definitely the one card that allows the Murloc Paladin to push really fast, somewhat reliably. SI7, who to target? The Murloc or the thing that actually dies? Yeah. So let's go for the Murloc for a better clear later. Draws 1 tip. It's not entirely devastating, but you don't want to draw the next one next turn. And there is the Toxfin coming down on the Mermy. And another Silverhand Recruit. Deciding against the little bit of extra stats on the board and instead preventing his opponent from trading off one thing by one. Because that would, at the end of the day, probably be more devastating. So that's a correct choice here. Titanic Lackey seems pretty good to delay the game. And that would require the entire board right now. And I think we're just going to see Prismatic Lens. And that's a pretty good tip, yeah. 2-mana tip, yep. Not a good Zephyrus, but before you tip, you really don't want a Zephyrus anyway, so... I think a Pimpkarp not very mad about having to clear off his board, so he gets more space for the Murlocs from the tipped scales, and Pimpkarp hits to clear the board, keeps a 1-1. Yeah. You don't currently have the hand that you'd want if you know that your opponent's going to play tip the scales. So here we see the Tidecaller proc start happening. And man, that's a lot of charge damage. That's a lot of everything, in fact. Maybe you just sap the Tidecaller. Because there's other targets you'd rather probably backstab that are more threatening on their own. Or backstab, I meant eviscerate, of course, which uncommon is the same as backstab, but of course this way it's even better. We might see a sap just to reduce another one of the biggest threats. That dies to exactly weapon or lackey. One of the 2-1s probably dies to the lackey. And again, I still think that sapping the Tidecaller makes sense. And might just be necessary. I don't know. It's a tough choice, but again, you're not gonna get a much better target in this matchup either, is the thing. So yeah, that's a more manageable board. Still 1 turn removed from being able to play Siamat, but the Kartut Defender is definitely also a good way to delay the game. And I think if you're Pimpkarp, you just play the Murloc the Tidecaller and the Collide Seer, just to establish your board a little more threateningly. Decides to go with Weapon and Hero Power, which is a little more damage this turn, if he hits the weapon in. And that just might have been the thought here. I can get lethal next turn. I don't have a reason to establish a huge board right now, and then potentially run into something. So I think we're just gonna see Kartut Defender. Huh. I mean, ends up being the same thing, kind of, but the first one has less health, so it now takes 2 1-1s to kill it. You still get a lot of healing out of it. Is it worth it? Who knows? No 1-1s on the board, of course. And we get easy lethal with Leroy. The regular Kartut would not have prevented that. So we can't really claim that a misplay lost anyone the game here. And this one goes to Pimpkarp, and that makes it 3-2 for Pimpkarp. Which means that Pimpkarp gets to advance into the finals of the Americas server for the Trash Bowl tournament, which of course can also be found on this channel, as well as all the matches leading up to this, which I hope you've already watched. Otherwise, you know, spoilers, I guess. Sorry, that was really late. You know, give this video a like if you want to support the tournament. Leave a comment on what you thought about how the people played. And subscribe to this channel if you don't want to miss the rest of the tournament. And until next time, that's it.